The first time I met Karl Denson was in 2004. Wow, that's 20 years ago. Certain things that we need as human beings for balance. Mark Levy was on drums, Bill Lush was on bass, his son Graham was playing guitar, John Medeski was on organ and keys. It was insane. And just
Yeah.
like great. And I love how all these different musicians interpret my music differently. My very first show that was gonna be with the Tiny Universe didn't get to play. Did this record at my home, and I did it in 3 months, and I played everything on it myself. And Bill Lush has this way of just like bringing people into this world that's like a big hug. And I'd cut my teeth with some of the best musicians in the world there, and this fire was lit in me, and it's like I don't need anybody.
What's up, man?
Hey, what's up, man? How you doing?
Not too bad, man. How about
Good, good.
yourself?
I'm doing well.
I
Just
haven't seen you in quite, kind of a forever.
it's been a hot minute, man. It's been probably a
Yeah,
hot 2 minutes.
yeah. It,
Yeah,
it seemed like for a while we were in like pretty close contact with booking and gigs, and let me get some of this stuff situated
yeah, yeah,
so I can hear you. But gigs and Colorado, Mile High Spirits, all that stuff. It seemed like
yeah, man.
we were talking for a little bit there, but
Yeah,
now it's been a couple of years and F and A. You look
yeah.
great. You look
Thanks,
great.
man. So do you. Yeah.
Hey, thank you.
This is living the gifts of sobriety and music and all the good things.
And so I guess let me just jump right into that because that's kind of a topic for me.
Yeah,
Sobriety. Some people don't want to talk about it. Some it's
I'm always open to
maybe
talking
a
about it.
little not taboo, but like,
Yeah, it's the
you
talking
know,
about it that keeps me going.
it
Like
it's this life that we live, right?
yeah.
In music and not necessarily being sober is they go hand in hand, and I've indulged in all of it, and it's
Yeah,
fun, and it's
I always tell people there's not a party out there that I haven't been to.
yeah, yeah. But it's good to hear that some other people are finding the alternative in
Yeah,
sobriety, and you've been one of them, and you look great, you seem great, you sound great.
thank you,
Uh,
man.
I don't have an agenda here. Let's just get right into whatever we want to talk about, and that's what I want to talk
Absolutely.
about. So how's unpack that? How's everything going for you now that you've chosen kind of a new path forward musically and
It's been great. It hasn't been easy, but like life isn't easy regardless. It's just I always say that I'm raw dogging life now instead of like instead of like hiding behind this mask. And it took me a long time to like figure out that that's what that was. Like I don't ever feel like I had a negative relationship. I feel like people say this a lot, but like I wasn't ever feeling like I was hitting this rock bottom thing and that was like the priority of my day. It just
right.
became this thing of like I didn't like the person I saw in the mirror. And I had to ask myself the hard question of how much of your full potential do you actually want to move forward? And the answer for me was 100%. So I was sticking with I want 100% of me to move forward every single day.
It's a it's fun, but it's a limiting factor, I think. Like,
Absolutely.
you know, in order to do whatever it is you want to do, I want to do, we all want to do, you kind of have to put everything you got into it.
Yeah.
And again, not a party you haven't been to, alcohol and all the things.
All
They're
the
they're
things.
they're fun,
It's
but
great. I mean, there's lots of it that I miss, and like, but there's one of those pros outweigh the cons.
mhm.
And I think one of the biggest things that I found is that my actual like base level of happiness rose, and I was unwilling to have that come back down to where it used to be.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I mean it's you hear over and over again, whether it's in sports or music or, I mean, kind of anything. It's just, I'm trying to find the right analogy, but like, you get into it or you get out of it what you put into it type of thing. And
Yeah,
I think
well, yeah, 100%.
sometimes it's something like that that you don't even realize is limiting what you're able to put into it, and hence you're not able to get the to receive or reciprocate the full
Yeah.
amount back because it's stifled. It's been cut short by
Yeah. I mean,
something as similar. Go ahead.
my sober date is August 23rd, 2020. And literally since that day, I put out a record a year since then. And like,
Yeah.
I didn't even know that was in me. Like, I literally I've sat down and like kind of went back and like listened to this stuff. And it was just like, man, like, I've never done anything like that. Like, I literally didn't have an inkling of this potential that was in me or this creativity. And I was like, man, I want to keep riding this wave for as long as possible.
Hell yeah. And
Yeah.
so start diving into that because you do have what's the new album?
It's called By Way of RVA.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Which okay, so just for anyone who might not be familiar with you, the man, DJ Williams, um, from RVA, from
From
Richmond,
Richmond, yeah,
Virginia.
grew up in Richmond, Virginia. I was born in Jersey, but I pretty much moved to Richmond as when I was a kid and lived most of my life there.
And
Beautiful music scene, and
it's
like,
a
yeah, it's
great music town.
it's
So
absolutely amazing. I think it's a lot of people who've never been there they just don't know.
yeah,
It's a mecca of music and talent, and just Virginia alone. D'Angelo, Dave Grohl, Missy Elliott,
yeah, yeah,
like Timbaland, like Pharrell.
right.
Yeah, Wow
And
Wow
in
Watson. It goes on and on.
quite a while, I had heard some of these things, that it was a good scene to be in, and a lot of good things came out of it. My wife, who you know actually, but
Mhm.
her family's from Virginia, and through a series of events and the pandemic and yada yada, family health, all the things we don't need to, dive into the details of, but
Yeah,
I ended up living, as you probably know, but I was in Richmond for the better part of a year.
yeah,
But it was during the pandemic, which not the best musical year,
yeah.
you know?
And for anywhere.
Right, of course. But nonetheless, I found, holy cow, like this is it's just a treasure trove of great music, of great musicians, of cool venues, of like really hip scenes.
Hmm.
And I just didn't know. It's a really cool place to be. But so between that kind of being an upbringing for you, and was it Denver pretty much after that for you, or was there anything in
No,
between?
I left Richmond in 2015 and I went to LA actually.
Okay.
And I had been playing with Carl Denson's Tiny Universe for 4 years at that point. I joined in 2011, but I was kind of doing, and they're based out of San Diego. So I was doing this bi-coastal thing, and I'd always wanted to live in California because it's California. And it's just like as a kid, I had this very clear vision of me living there one day. And since I was playing at this band and it already had become like San Diego, my second home. I had a bunch of friends in LA and the LA scene, and that was my first kind of part, like leaving the Richmond scene. That was in 2015, and kind of I was like, well, if I'm gonna go just dive into this extremely talented and very challenging and what's the word I'm looking for? Just like it's the LAC. It's like it's always been the cream of the crop, and I was like, man, if I
Yeah.
can like cut my teeth here, then and it really forced me to grow as just as a musician, as a person. It taught me how to see myself as a brand moving forward,
Yeah.
and yeah, and I'd cut my teeth with some of the best musicians in the world there, and then 2018 is when I decided I was over it. I was over the everyday hustle from the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep. And I was getting older, and I just it came down to quality of life. And uh, every time I came to play a show in Denver, I just really loved how it felt like home to me, even before I moved here. And I love the music scene here. I love the natural scenes that are around here, natures, the mountains. It just all really spoke to me. And I've been here 6 years now, and I don't see myself going anywhere for a while.
Yeah. Um, it's a great state, great town, right in Denver, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a great town musically, culturally, the food, the everything. It's a great town to be.
yeah.
So again, you and I haven't spoken for a little bit, but as you well know, and others might, but I was in Denver for the better part of a decade. Loved
Mhm.
it. Absolutely loved it. But time, has its own will,
Yeah.
and the will spoke to me, and that was, I started a family basically,
Yeah.
and there was a
Beautiful
calling
one
back
too.
home. You know what? Thank you very much.
Yeah.
But I saw a social media post that you did. I won't call you out too much, but maybe a little bit. Something about
Yeah.
being landlocked in
Landlocked.
Denver.
That was yesterday. Yeah.
So I'm back in Wisconsin, and I don't have
Yeah.
an ocean or anything like that. But I do have to push back against your post just a little bit
Of
because
course.
when I was in Denver, and again, I loved it out there. The mountains are
Yeah.
beautiful, the scene, everything. But I did notice, being from Wisconsin, I was like, man, there's no fucking water out here. So just a little bit. They call Minnesota to our west here the land of 10,000 lakes. Wisconsin, this is just a silly little thing
Yeah.
Wisconsinites and Minnesotans have against one another, but Wisconsin per capita or something like that, I don't know what the term is, but we have just as many, if not more, lakes than Minnesota. So while it's not ocean, because let's be honest, the ocean's fucking
Ocean's
terrifying.
the best.
Anyways,
It is
no,
terrifying. It's the
it's
best, but
okay.
it's
It's
scary as
okay.
hell.
It's terrifying. There's a
Yeah.
lot of lakes here, but I've been living some lake life, and I forgot how much I actually liked it and missed it. And being able to get out on the water is really special to me. But it's I decided to call you out on the social
Yeah,
media
there's
post.
lakes here there too. There's beautiful lakes here. And
I
there's, I
hear
mean,
you.
there's, and
I
you
hear
know,
you.
this is like I get it. Like there's a form of balance that you have to have, like being by water and being whether it's the coast or whether it's been like Minnesota, Wisconsin, Colorado. Like there's certain things that we need as human beings for balance. And I think it's
Right.
just like I think that we tend to conceptualize cities and states or like where we live a little too much with what we need and want when really what it comes down to is how easily you can access these things, which is not fair because not everyone has the ability to travel as much as I do as
Hmm.
well too. And also your village, the people who are close to you. Like that to me, that's what makes a place. But I don't think I've ever felt landlocked. And that's what my post was about.
Yeah.
I don't think everyone's actually felt a feeling of like waking up in a cold sweat, scratching the walls, like, oh my God, I'm landlocked. Like that's what I was calling out.
I hear you.
You
Yeah,
know, like it's
I'm just fucking with you. Maybe it's because
yeah.
I'm a cancer. I'm a
Yeah, but that's even what the post is.
water sign.
It's all fun and games, you know. It's just,
Yeah,
I love kind of like poking the bear a little bit on the internet.
that's what the internet's for, I think.
Mm-hmm. It
Um,
has to
but
be.
but you're right. It's all about people, and the people out there are fantastic.
Yeah,
Um, on every level. I mean, the venue owners, the musicians. I still can't get, again, I love where I live right now and my family and all the things. Um, I will say the musical community out here is not, I mean, Denver was a special place. I don't feel like I necessarily have that right now, but that's
yeah.
okay.
And there's
Because
no
it's
permanence in anything.
Yep, yep. Um, but so part of me, I guess I'm curious since I've left a handful of years ago. The Denver scene, I remember a lot of open jams, things like what the local 46 was one of the
Yeah,
that.
they just started that up again.
Okay, well there you
Yeah,
go. So, and what I'm trying to push right now is, um, COjam started as a Colorado specific. Let's promote some local music.
yeah.
And now that I'm away from Colorado, the message is still there. I still want to promote local music, but on more of a national scale, a national level. So, I've got some friends out east, out west, down south, here in the Midwest, whatever it might be, but I want to introduce local music to the masses. So, um, in your time, let's call it the last 10 years since you've been in Denver, what have you seen? How has it changed? What's going on now that didn't used to be, or what used to be that's not? What's going on in Colorado right now, in Denver specifically, if that's where you're
Well,
living?
the jam scene and just like the local community of musicians getting together is running strong right now. Like
Hmm.
that, I think that's a lot of the reason why I even moved here because it reminded me so much of that same scene in Richmond when I was growing up. Like when all the homies are not on tour and we're all here in town, like we collaborate and we meet up and they just brought back the local 46 one we were just talking about. There's one called Off the Cuff at Meadowlark, which is really
Okay.
amazing. A guy named Eman Alexander puts it on, and it's primarily focused around like the BIPOC scene here in Colorado, but like giving people a voice in their 15 minutes to come on stage, whether it's like poetry, every musician, like rappers, and just it's a beautiful scene, and everyone there is like engaged, and like that is something I think will always be strong in the Colorado scene. Like that's just Colorado supports music in a really live, beautiful, and engaging way, and that's
For
a lot of the
sure.
reason why I'm here. And yeah, and that'll live strong for a long time. And over the I've been here almost it'll be 7 years, going on 7 years now, and the only thing I've seen change is like the pandemic, and that's when we were all kind of I like to call it adult timeout and just waiting, patiently waiting until we could come back and do what we've all been doing. But like the scene here is growing, and I'm seeing a lot of new cats move here in the music scene, and it's still growing. And we have all these music venues who are catering to just helping us get our voices heard. So it's been beautiful.
Another thing that I really liked about Denver is its independent venues.
Yeah,
I think we're all familiar enough as artists and musicians and such, but then, on a different level as the fan, the ticket holder, so to speak, having to deal with the Live Nation stuff and
and the AEGs and the yeah.
the big boys, the service fees, and I think most people, most Americans want to support local business, and that extends into the music industry and
Yeah,
local venues and wanting to support things people who are doing their own thing in an independent, manner. And Denver was really cool, in its venues and there's partnerships, and certainly there's eventually buyouts and that kind of thing.
yeah. I
But
mean,
in
also like those independent managers, they're also just holding on to survive as well too. So you
yeah,
start to like fault them for going down that road when really we're just all out here trying to eat.
right.
Yeah,
Everyone's got a bottom line there, but it's cool to see, you know, um, some of the, like a Cervantes. I mean, I'm sure you've played there
I live a
many.
block away. That's how much I love
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
it.
But that's cool. And it's something that not every town has the luxury of, to be able to kind of do their own thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. They're definitely doing it right out there. But so, you know, if being from Richmond, what what are some of the differences that you see, and how often do you get back to Richmond, to kind of do your thing out there as well? Out east.
My Richmond is like a quarterly trip for me. I'd say every 2 to 3 months, maybe 3 to 4 months, I try to go back to Richmond. My parents are still there. They're getting older, so I'm trying to spend as much time with them as I
Hmm.
can. And I'll book a show out of it, book a little Virginia run out of it while I'm there. But yeah, still, I'm actually going back to Virginia in December. Got some shows in Charlottesville, and I do a cancer benefit every Christmas Eve, and that's been going strong. And we got some great guests coming for that, coming out for that. And like Virginia, in my heart, will always be home for me. Like it's like I go there, and there's just that feeling of I don't want to go back to live because I didn't want to be that kid that stayed in his hometown for his whole life. I wanted to come out here and taste and try on different cities and states on for size, and I don't think that'll ever change. But Virginia is it holds a special place in my heart, so I try to go back as often as I can.
Are you a romantic?
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, Virginia being for
Yeah,
lovers, right?
yeah, that's a real thing.
I had to throw that out there, I
Yeah.
guess. Um, yeah, no, I don't know. That's how I was for sure. Um, let's just call it Milwaukee. I grew up west of Milwaukee,
Mhm.
and college was Milwaukee. My bands were these Milwaukee bands and stuff, and it was cool. I guess part of it for me, some towns are kind of more competitive in nature.
Oh
Let's
yeah.
just speaking within the musical realm. Milwaukee, I always felt as a youth was overly competitive, and I never really understood it.
Well, I
It's
never really spent enough time there to know.
well,
That's interesting.
there's other cities like that for sure. Denver's not one of them. That was
Yeah.
the biggest appeal. One of the things that I noticed immediately upon landing in Denver was that like no one's really like truly competing in a fierce kind of a way. It was
Yeah.
way more collaborative, as you've already outlined.
I
Uh,
think I've always felt like the more blue collar a town, the more kind of fight people feel like they need to have. Because,
that could be.
a lot of
That
this,
could be.
they've been beaten down like a lot economically and socially. So maybe that has a little to like connectivity to the competitiveness, or
Just the
I
overall
don't know, just a
attitude.
hypothesis for me, but that's what,
Sure. The
yeah.
overall like attitude, the survival
Yeah.
instinct or something
Yeah.
like that. But it was true. There was kind of just an edge to it. And I think people were overall friendly, but it was just more competitive. Whereas when I went to Denver, everyone seemed like, let's just fucking jam,
Yeah. We
let's
just want
all
to play.
get together
Yeah.
and support one another. And I thought that
Yeah,
was really
man.
cool. Um, to each their own, I suppose. But I was going somewhere with that, and I lost my train of thought. But
It'll come back.
so thank you. I hope so. It sounds like so. If we can throw a little plug out there, December 23rd, you're going to be out in Charlottesville or Richmond.
December 23rd is in Norfolk.
Okay.
December 20th. Let me do this in order so it makes more sense. So December 19th, I'll be in Charlottesville. December 20th, I'll be in Richmond. December 21st is when the benefit is. Sorry, we moved it this year. So December 21st, I'll be in Norfolk, and December 22nd, I'll be in DC.
Cool. And I'll throw a little plug down below, a little
Cool.
link, what have you. But so speaking of which, speaking of music, the newish album by way of RVA, that
Hmm.
came out, what, spring?
Yeah, March.
And what's going on there? What was the recording process like? The songwriting process like? The upcoming tour? Dive into that if you would.
It was awesome. It was a spite driven project, and I won't get too much into that,
All
but
right, all
I put out a
right.
record the summer before with a label which I won't name, and I had a little run in with the team there, so I kind of went my separate ways and I needed something to tour behind, so I immediately did this record in my at my home, and I did it in 3 months, and I played everything on it myself, and I put it out as fast as I could before I went out on tour.
Hell yeah.
And right before I put it out, I also applied to start my own LLC for my own record label. So I put it out on my own label. So it was everything I did alone. And it was like I had this fire in me. When I've been done wrong, I this fire was lit in me. And it's like I don't need anybody. I don't need any of these suits. I don't need any of these
Mhm.
people telling me and putting constrictions on me. So I walked away from this label and I made an entire record by myself in 3 months. And I started my own label. I played everything on this record, and it's my favorite record I've ever put out. And
Fuck yeah. Hell yeah.
now that I have this label, I don't need to lean on anybody else but myself to moving forward. And I've cut out the middleman, and it's 2024, and like anyone with a nice computer and a little bit of business sense can do it all on your own with a little bit of hard work. And that's what I decided to do.
I know you're a hardworking man. I've known
Thank
that
you.
since I met you. But what I didn't know is, I guess many musicians are multi-instrumentalists to some degree. Um, but you do everything on this record, huh?
Yeah. The
Guitar, bass.
drums,
What's all on
guitar,
there? Keys, bass. I mean, drums. I didn't know you were a
guitar,
drummer,
bass. Yeah, I was a drummer before I was a guitar player.
dude.
Yeah,
So
man.
I'm a
I
drummer first
literally
and
set up a
foremost.
drum in this walk-in closet right here to my left. I set up my little drum kit, and I laid
Yeah.
down probably like 30 different beats. And then pulled from that, and I was like, this is dope. And then I made a song from that, and then went back and redid the drums. Then I went back and did all the guitar parts, and then layered all the vocals in my bathroom, and then cut everything here at this same desk that I'm talking to you on. I have like my monitors here, and yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It
So
was a lot of fun. It was like a bucket list thing for me because I knew one day I would love to do a record all on my own. I just didn't realize it was going to be this soon, and the timing the timing couldn't have been better.
good. I absolutely love hearing that. I do some of that stuff on my own. Mostly it's demos. I'm trying to get a band going out here, but I
Nice.
got I got kids and I'm
It's a lot.
working. I've got, I'm running my own business and this, that, and the other, and it's just tough to keep up with. And music, unfortunately for me, is a little bit on the back burner, but that's okay because
Yeah,
there's things that, priorities and you do what you do in order, you know.
absolutely.
But I love hearing that. You don't need You're right. 2024, you don't need all the suits. You don't need the corporations. You
Yeah,
just kind of need an audience and you need a drive, a passion, which I know you've
exactly.
got.
Yeah,
I didn't realize you were drumming and doing all this other stuff on your own too, though. So that's
yeah,
fucking
man.
awesome. As far as the touring band, who's in the touring band though?
It depends on where I'm at and where I'm
Yeah.
going and who's available. Like I don't have a definitive band. I'm trying to change that right now, actually, because coming up in the new year, I'm planning on touring a lot more. But I'm going to San Diego for Halloween this week, and I've literally just called up my San Diego crew. Chris
Hmm.
Stillwell, from my homie from Tiny Universe, Grey Ball Stars. John Staten, he was a drummer for Tiny Universe too, and Bobby Cressy's like amazing keyboard player, played with Snoop Dogg, played with a bunch of just great artists. So that's my band. I'm gonna go to San Diego, and then I'll go to New Orleans, and I'll get my New Orleans friends. I'll go Colorado. I have a dozen or more different musicians I choose from. I have my West Coast or my East Coast band, which is mostly my Virginia boys. I have my New York crew. So like last time I counted, I've been touring with 54 different rotating band
Is that
members,
it?
and it's depending on the show with a 4 to 6 piece band. So I feel very lucky that I have these people who believe in me and believe in what I do, and it's actually been very fun for me because I mean, you've seen when I come. Last time I was at Perry's Tavern. Was the last time I saw you? No,
I honestly
when
don't
was that?
remember.
Yeah, I don't remember either. But I feel very lucky that I can call on these people and like I literally just tour by myself sometimes. I'll fly to a city and call my friends in that city and be like, hey man, I know we remember these songs because I got a show coming up.
Mhm.
It's been great. And I love how all these different musicians interpret my music differently. I'm always because I don't ever want to put a leash on anybody, but I want here's the song, but I want you to be yourself. I want you to interpret it the way that you hear it, and that keeps every show really fresh and fun for me.
Absolutely.
Google Calendar
Um,
has become my best friend too because I just to keep track of who's playing what on what show.
no,
It can be a
I think
lot
that
too.
that's super important. What you just said, there might be, let's call it the confines of a song, the overall map, parameters, whatever you
Yeah,
might want to
here's the
call it,
blueprint,
right, of a
but build
tune,
it
but
in your vision.
having somebody else interpret it. Well, what was it? I grew up kind of a 90s grunge type of skateboarding kid. Um, I was really into Beck,
I love
right?
Beck.
Yeah,
So killing.
he's awesome. But he put out a thing at this point, it was probably like 10 years ago. It was the sheet music only, and then had a bunch of different people interpret the sheet.
Yeah,
I thought that was
I remember
brilliant.
that. Yeah,
I don't know if
absolutely.
I ever really heard a whole lot of that. I just remember the premise, and I thought that was really cool. And exactly what you're describing, to be able to do that. Here's my music, by all means. Or first of all, before by all means, uh, here's the music, what I want to accomplish,
Hmm.
A to Z. How we get there, though, is up to interpretation. I think is just brilliant. I think it's really important, especially in the approach to music that you're describing. Like these are my tunes, but you want people to be able to express themselves
Yeah.
in original manner.
Yeah,
And,
I mean,
and,
I've
and
gone on tour as the sideband for many things, and there's been opportunities where I've been told strictly of what to do, and this
yeah,
is the part, and this is what you play, and I'm fine with that. I could be the sideman, sit in the corner, and do whatever you need me to do. I'm a hired gun, but I've also given the opportunity to be like, hey, this is roughly what I'm looking for, but I'm here because I trust you and I want you to be you, and I've always loved both, but the latter is kind of what I think being a musician is all about. Like
right.
we didn't get into this to have any rules or any like confines on us. Like it should just be wide open, and that's why I'm in this. That's why I've always been drawn to music. Like I don't want anybody to tell me what to do, and I love this freedom of expression, and that's kind of what I try to relate to my band. And before we get on stage, the last thing that I say to everybody is like, hey, then the number one rule on my stage is that let's have fun.
Hell
There's
yeah.
no, yeah. Phil, I would play with Phil Lush and friends, and I remember reading this post since he just passed away, rest in peace. And I got invited on that gig. I don't even know how, but I remember kind of freaking out. We didn't get a set list till like the day I flew in to do his show, and John Medeski was on it. It was crazy. It was all these. His son Graham was on it. It was these really heavy players. And I think right before we're going on stage, like he could kind of sense that I was freaking out, a little bit nervous, which doesn't happen often. But it's like, dude, like I know the Grateful Dead and I've known some of the music, but I'm not like this like hardcore fan. Other people who come see these shows like know this music inside and out, and I just don't. And he's like, well, he's like, I love that. He's like, I love hanging off the cliff. And right before we went off stage, he like looked at me and like grabbed me by the shoulders. He goes, "There's no mistakes. There's only opportunities." And I was like, "Oh my god, thank you
Oh,
so much
how
for saying
perfect
that."
is that?
Right? And I was like, "Let's go." And I think that's what those guys are all about, man. It's like it's fun to hang off the edge of the cliff for a little bit, and it's like you go out there with everything all planned out, and it's going to be a planned out show. But if
Yeah.
you are willing to just like be a little bit unrehearsed and a little bit open to whatever can happen, that's when that magic happens. That's why I go see shows. That's why the best shows that we've seen is when that spontaneity happens. So that's why I let my band know, be yourself and don't hold on to every word that I say. Like let's hang off the edge of the cliff for a little bit.
That's 100% right, at least in my estimation. Music is, you know, you can write things that are super complex that have to be played in a certain way, a certain
Yeah,
manner, whatever. But for me, music happens in a spontaneous fashion. That's the best music I've ever played has never been thought of, written down,
yeah,
rehearsed, whatever. And I think that holds true for a lot of us, especially in this scene that I'm trying to promote, that I think that we're ultimately in. And it's such a loose term, this jam scene, whatever you might want to call it.
yeah.
It can be metal, but you're improvising. It can be jazz, it can be funk, it can be
Yeah, I would
bluegrass.
say
It's
everybody's jamming. We're all
right.
we're all creating in the moment.
Right. And, I didn't realize maybe until right now that you had that opportunity with, what'd you say? So describe that gig, Phil Lesh and Medeski, and where was that? Who was that?
Yeah,
What was
it
that on?
was Phil Lush and friends, and he always like he has that band is also has a ton of people who come in and out. Krasno's been in that band. Nicky Bloom's been in that band. Like it's his thing. He's playing these songs he's been playing for like 50, 60 years, but he invites other people to interpret it their own way. So he has or owned this his own club in where he lives in San Rafael, just north of San Francisco. It was called Terrapin Crossroads. And like I said, I don't really remember how this happened, but my name came up and I got invited to be a part of Phil Lesh and Friends. And I got a little bit more information on the gig, and it was like when Mark Levy was on drums, Phil Lesh was on bass, his son Graham was playing guitar, John Medeski was on organ and keys. It was insane, and just
Yeah.
like, oh man, there was I think Jeff Coffin was on sax or something. It was just like super stellar lineup of like all these heroes of mine. And I remember like his management team, I was like, I kept asking for the music, who the set was going to be, and it was just like crickets. And I was just like, all right, this is the day before. And then the day of the show came, and I flew up to San Francisco, and I finally like I walk into the hotel that we're staying in, and John Medeski is at the check-in desk, and I was like, hey man, he's like, so stoked to play with you. Like, we're gonna this gig, and I was like, by the chance, did you get any music? He's like, I haven't gotten a damn thing. So we were both like cracking up, which made me feel a lot better. And I was just like, well, if he didn't get anything, I think I've heard this is how this camp can be. We're just gonna wing it. And yeah, we showed up to Terrapin Crossroads and for rehearsal, and everyone kind of just bonded for a minute, and then we finally kind of an idea of the songs we were gonna play. And Phil Lesh has this way of just like bringing people into this world that's like a big hug, and it's just like he's just the kindest human being, and just is so adventurous, and he's got this big knowledge of symphony and like classical music, and he truly loves what he does. And like I had so much more respect for not just him but like the Grateful Dead music and what they were trying to achieve from that gig. And I learned a lot from that one show than I think I learned in 10 years of music.
Right. And
Yeah, I learned about letting go.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
coming
this.
from this funk world, and coming like this is your part, and you stay on this, and you just and it's like no, because I don't ever play the same thing twice. Sometimes I don't even play the same measure twice. Like it's so I was so out of my wheelhouse. It was just like, but when I fell in the groove, and I was like, okay, I see you guys are doing here. This is like completely free form. Like there's improvising and jamming and making, but those guys have taken it to a place where like they're not afraid to just be completely naked on stage.
Right, right.
Yeah,
That's a great way to put it. And you're
yeah,
so right. I mean, that approach to music, first of all, let's just say that if you were invited to that, that they knew,
yeah,
you're a badass and you can hang. They trusted you
yeah.
to be able to hang.
It's
Whether or not
incredible.
you knew you were
I
even
didn't know
able to hang,
it.
they're
Yeah,
like, all right, this guy can play, and the philosophy might not be completely embedded yet.
yeah,
But let's embed that philosophy in this
yeah,
badass motherfucker, which is what you
yeah.
are.
I know how
Um,
I got that gig. My manager at the time also managed Bill Kreutzmann, the drummer
mhm.
from the Grateful Dead, and like my name was brought up to do one of those Phil-ish things, and I was told it was gonna happen, and then it was like in my mind I was like, okay, whatever, and then like so many months went by, I like wrote it off, and then the phone call came that I like, yeah, I was like, oh yeah, this is the thing that was brought up. It was like months ago. I just thought it was like, management's blowing smoke up my ass.
Right. So yeah, we're kind of talking about the Phil Ash experience, but you mentioned Carl Denson, which, assuming you're okay to dive into that
Yeah,
topic,
absolutely.
for those of you who might not, anyone out there who might not know, how'd you get hooked up with him? How was your experience? All things Carl Denson. Unpack that if you would.
The first time I met Karl Denson was in 2004. Wow, that's 20 years ago.
You
And
old man.
yeah, I got the chance. He was playing in my hometown, and the venue had asked if my band would open for him. And it was awesome. It's this place called Alley Cats, which no longer exists. It was a really great club who hosted some great shows. And Karl, which I later found out after being in his band for a long time, doesn't normally like watch the opening band. But I remember, I think John Staten, who was the drummer at the time, he went and got Karl off the bus and said that he needed to come see my band. And I remember in the middle of the show looking over at the side stage, and Karl was standing there. So I invited him over to like play some sax with the band. And then his set came, and I ended up sitting in with the Tiny Universe. It was a great night. I ended up hanging out on his bus. We exchanged numbers and didn't talk for maybe a couple of years, but he does also just like drop me a text and be like, how's everything going? How's the music going? Just checking in on me. And anytime he was in town or like we were at the same festival, like we'd sit in on each other's bands, and I don't know, just kind of kept in touch. He was like he's just like that person, like in the scene. And then 2011 came, and I got a phone call from his manager saying that his guitar player couldn't play some festival in Canada and asked if I could sub for him. I said, absolutely. I'm free that date. Let's go. So once again, here I am asking for the music for, I think it was like an hour and a half set that we had. And it's in Ottawa, Canada. There's going to be no rehearsal. So I had to like learn this music and go up there, and we're just going to play the show. And Karl sent me this folder with like an obscene amount of music in it. It was a lot of music. It was probably like 35 songs. And I was like, man, we're playing like an hour and a half set. I don't know what this is all about. But I remember I had a gig. I had like a week to learn this music before the festival in that weekend. And I had a gig on like that Wednesday. I ended up canceling it because I literally just stayed in my apartment in Richmond, like learning all this music, like learning it to a T. Weekend came, flew to Canada, I met up with the band, and we had a couple hours before sound check. And Karl was like, hey, I'm writing the set list. He's like, what songs do you know? And I was like, well, you sent me like all this music. And we had no rehearsals. Like, I know all of them. Like, he was like, and he just said, okay. And he walked away, and he wrote the set list. And this crazy storm came in, like the whole like the sky shifted, and the sky just like turned the scariest color I've ever seen in my life. And they canceled the rest of the shows for that festival, and like I didn't even get to play. So like my very first show that was gonna be with the Tiny Universe didn't get to play, and I got paid. Like I had a free flight to Canada, and that was it. And then I went home, and there was another festival coming up, and it was also in Canada, like maybe like a month or two later. And what I was told, like for some reason, I'm not gonna say his name because I don't want to put his business in the street, but the guitar player couldn't go to couldn't cross the border into Canada for whatever reason. Canada's pretty strict with certain things. So I was like, cool, let's do it. And I was all excited. I was like, there's no way like this is gonna happen twice in a row. Wrote the set list, we played the show, and at the end of that show, I was all like sitting around with the band. And then Karl asked me if I wanted to be in the band. And I was like, so that last Canada show and this one was literally like everyone knew it was my audition without except for me. And like the
Right.
fact that I learned all that music like looked really good on my part. And yeah, like the summer of 2011, I started playing full time with the Karl Denson's Tiny Universe.
So as a fan, because I have
Yeah,
long been a fan of Karl Denson's,
yeah.
was that around the time of The Bridge and that material?
No, the bridge had come out like early 2000s because that band started in like yeah the band started, we were still doing a lot of that material though because I mean
Okay.
that album was my introduction to the Tiny Universe. I the Grey Boy All Stars was my introduction to Karl Denson because my freshman year of college the kid in the dorm next to me was like blasting Grey Boy All Stars and like walked over and I was like, you have to tell me what this is. That's how I learned of not just Karl Denson but like of that band. Yeah, so I was a fan. I'd seen him at festivals. I'd gone to shows like well before I was ever in the band. So it was definitely it was a very surreal moment for me to just like kind of coming to this guy's shows and now I'm flying all over the world with them years later. It was pretty cool. And I played with him for 12 years. I resigned last summer, last August.
And to pursue DJ Williams stuff, shots
Yeah,
fired.
yeah. It's nothing. It was a very respectful and mutual parting of ways, and I got his blessing to spread my own wings and fly and try to build my own name out here.
And given that, amicable departure or whatever, I would assume amicable that maybe the collaboration isn't completely finished. Sounds like you guys still have a good relationship, and whether it's in a
Yeah,
live setting or maybe in a studio setting at some point.
absolutely. Yeah, I
Um,
was out in we happened to be in New Orleans at the same time, and I ended up getting on stage with those guys, and it was like my first time being in the audience since I had left the band, and it was great to see some of the new younger fresh meat that's in that band still carrying on the torch of the Tiny Universe. It was
he's
great.
such a badass, Karl.
He
I
really is,
mean,
man. He's a great musician. He's a great human being.
yeah. And I don't know, I'm certainly on the level that you do. I have one just little story I got to share. It's
Yeah.
an embarrassing story for me because, like you said, 20 years ago, you're talking about 20 years knowing
Yeah.
Karl or whatever, that kind of thing. So 20 years ago, 2004, I don't know if it was 2004 or 2010, somewhere in the middle of there, but I know it was on the Bridge tour. So maybe it was closer to
Yeah.
'04 than 2011 or whatever. But Karl played a show, the 10 Universe, at the Rave in Milwaukee, but I think specifically it was the Rave 2, which is like
Mhm.
this. It's that's a venue that has like three or four venues all in the same building. It's
Oh yeah.
The Eagles Ballroom, the Rave, and I think the Rave 2 are all in the
Yeah, I
same
remember
building.
that spot.
It's a weird place. Love it or hate it. It is what it is. It's got a lot of history to it. But anyways, I think I was in college and, you know, 10 Universe came. I was young, quite intoxicated, bringing it full circle to that
There's
sobriety
the
conversation.
disclaimer.
So not at all sober and a young man, but at the end of the show, the security of that show was pretty lax for whatever reason. And being my drunken self, I somehow wandered uh, at the encore. They had finished doing what they're doing, and during the encore, I wandered backstage without anybody noticing, and I found Karl sitting there. And I'm a nice guy, but
Yeah.
pretty intoxicated. I just went right up to him and put my arm around him. He's maybe even a little shorter than me. I'm not the biggest guy in the
Yeah.
world. Put my arm around him and I told him what song I wanted to hear. And he was really nice. I think I said The Bridge or Freedom
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
something like that. And he was nice and he's like, yeah, okay, dude, whatever.
Yeah. That's
And
about right.
all of a sudden, I felt a huge arm around my neck,
Mhm.
dragging me out. And what the
Yeah.
fuck are you doing back here? And it was like, it took me by surprise. But I
I wonder
remember
if that
like,
was his old tour manager. He's this really big dude.
It was very large.
Yeah.
But I do remember like, as being as surprised and physically overtaken, I still managed to just be like, "Thanks, Karl," as I was being dragged out.
Yeah, yes.
And I got kicked out of the show, but I could
Yeah.
hear from the outside, from the alley. They played the song I wanted him to play, so I was like
Nice.
outside in the alley dancing
Yeah.
by myself.
That's
So
awesome, man.
it's a stupid story, but I had to share it.
Yeah.
Um, so
You're
anyways,
not the first, you're not the last, I'll tell you that.
yeah, let's just say that.
Yeah.
I've learned a thing or two since then.
Yeah.
So if you would, let's kind of wrap it up. What is your band up to? Do we have some shows that we can look forward to? I think you're heading out on a tour. You've got that album behind you.
Yeah. So I've been all summer and all spring, I was on the road and I had a ton of dates lined up for fall, and I needed to take care of myself mentally and physically. So I they weren't really fully booked, but I had to cancel it before we got there because I knew I would probably burst into tears if I had to go back on the road again. I'm since I'm out on my own, I don't have the budget for like a tour manager and like a guitar tech and all this stuff. So I'm wearing many hats on the road. Like I'm not just the band leader, I'm the merch person, I'm the tour manager, I'm consulting with hotels. And so I do that all myself right now because I'm still building my own thing. So I decided to take a break from the road until 2025. I'm still doing shows, but I'm not touring until next year. And I've got a ton of dates I'm about to drop on djwilliamsmusic.com probably by the end of the year. And I'm gonna be hitting it hard in 2025. I'm doing Halloween in San Diego coming up, and I'm doing a string of dates in Virginia that we just talked about in December. And New Year's Eve, I'll be here in Colorado at the Surf Hotel in Buena Vista. So I'm doing some fun things, but I'm enjoying being home right now and taking care of me so I can be the person I want to be when I do go back on the road.
Hell yeah. You gotta make sure that, take care of yourself first before,
Yeah,
because how are you gonna present yourself?
yeah, yeah, for
So much of
sure.
music is giving yourself
It is.
to other people, to the audience.
Yeah,
And I don't know if your everyday listener really realizes that, especially if you're doing it night after night type of thing.
yeah.
It takes a toll.
It does, and the
You,
traveling is a lot. And I've driven 56,000 miles this year. That's a lot.
yes, it is. Yes, it is. Well, good on you for doing that. We're all living our
And
dreams, and it's what I want to do, man, is help people who just grind. That's the thing I keep coming back to is that
yeah,
term. The people who are grinding night after night and week and month and year after year. Um, it's a tough industry, mentally, physically, all of it.
yeah.
And I'm looking to speak to the badass motherfuckers who give their all every
Good.
goddamn
Well, I
night.
appreciate you having me on here, man. It means a lot. And thank you
Hell yeah.
for seeing me in that light.
You bet, you bet. So that's all I got for you, man.
Yeah,
Um,
man.
I'll throw some plugs down there for you. Everybody who's watching, who's listening, please go see this man. He is a badass, is recognized as such by Karl Denson and so many others. Um, but yeah, keep doing what you're doing. I've seen some videos that you put out there. You sound great. I know you've been
Thank
working
you.
on your tone.
Oh
It's
yeah.
been it's been sounding
It's
really,
I
really
gotta do I
good.
gotta do Strat too, man. And this thing is like ridiculous. I've written off Strats for a long time, and now I get it.
Yeah?
I found my one. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
So it'll
tone.
be with me.
So I'm a drummer first and foremost, but I do play
Yeah.
guitar. Um, but I've never ever considered myself a guitar player. But I can kind of like at least listen into the conversation and kind of like follow along type of thing.
Yeah.
My brother is a badass guitar player and he is a tone fanatic. So I can follow that conversation and I get where you're coming from. It's not an easy thing to dial it in, especially night after night, or with a different guitar, a new guitar, or anything
Oh
like
yeah. I
that.
mean,
So
I've been playing guitar for 25 plus years, and I'm still dialing things in
yeah,
and
yeah.
learning and growing. Yeah.
Well, it's sounding great. It really
Thank you.
is. New album's awesome. Everybody, please check that out and go see this man. Go see this man because yeah, you bring the heat night after night, and I love what
Appreciate
I
that,
hear.
man. Thank you.
I love what I hear, and yeah, man, keep it up. I
Will
know
do,
you
man.
will. And best to you and your health and all the things. So
And you as well, man. Thanks so much for having me here, man. Hope we get to do this again soon.
Exactly right. And hope to see you soon
Absolutely.
just in a personal context or
Yeah.
in a live musical setting.
Let's stay in touch.
All right, buddy. Have a good
Take
one.
care, man. You too.
Yep.